Oh, here we go. Welcome to the Active Travel Cafe for the 21st of April, 2026. I'm Robin Tucker, your host for tonight from Oxfordshire. And tonight we'll have Deborah Willemen talking about school streets in Greater Manchester. And before that, as ever, we will have the Active Travel news from all around the country, sometimes around the world. And Mark Strong already has his hand up. Mark, what news have you got for us?
Hi, Robin. Few things. You actually asked about Better Connected, and you said who's going to summarise it. And I put in the chat for the Active Travel chat
Right.
that basically Professor Glenn Lyons, former chair of CIHT, and I think a lot of people know Glenn, has done a 15-page summary, but he's also done an executive summary on his LinkedIn. So that's probably the best, and he's paid as a professor and academic to do that. So rather than reading it all out, it's probably best to go and have a look at that. But I just wanted to say two other things that have happened with the local transport plan guidance, which has just been sitting on for ages. Government's been sitting on for ages. That's also came out and it's quite hidden. So again, maybe we need somebody to actually analyse that in more detail. There's quite a lot on active travel, shared mobility, school travel, and so on, micromobility in there. So again, I'm not going to go through it now and take time away from Deborah's presentation. And the other thing, though, is that right now, I think, is a debate on pavement parking, or the amendment to pavement parking is being debated in the House of Commons. So hopefully people lobbied the MP to support it, but it's a government amendment, so it'll go through anyway.
I think you're right. It's certainly about now. I don't know if it's exactly at this moment. It'd be
Well,
great if
it's this evening,
is.
this afternoon.
It's right. Okay, we can tune into that. Yeah,
I just wanted
good.
to say one thing. One thing that is a worry is that it gives the powers to the combined authority, not the council. So in places with combined authorities like Cambridgeshire, where the mayor and the local authorities disagree, there may be problems. The government thinks it won't be a problem, but I don't know what's going to happen for you in Oxfordshire, for example. So you haven't got one yet, but who
It,
knows?
yes. It's the highest level existing transport related authority. So it will be if you've got a county council but not yet a combined authority, it's the county council. So yeah, better connected. Mark, that sounds a great source, and I must read it. So better connected. I'm sure people have noticed it. I think the things I pulled out of it were. I guess my view was it's a good list of I don't know 30 different actions, each of which I thought were good and sensible. But it didn't, although it had an organizing framework, it didn't come across as massively coherent and transformational, unless you count the kind of addition of lots of things as transformational. There was no new investment, but then that's not necessarily the way that government does things, and road and rail are still the big items. There was no massive new commitment to investment to active travel, although it pointed to a lot of reasons why active travel was a good thing. Um, and Mark mentioned the local transport planning guidance, which is good. That's been talked about for a long time. It also promised the long-awaited manual for streets. It said that simple side road zebras, something we've been big fans of here for a long time, should be coming in new guidance coming soon, and quite a lot on public transport and integrating that, guidance on cycling and cycle parking at stations, lots on digital information and uh, both for passengers and information about the transport system. Um, so lots of good stuff. I guess the question is whether it will add up properly to big change. In that way, it's a bit like the road safety strategy. It will all be proof of the pudding in the eating, as they say. And with that, I shall pass to Ruth, who has a hand up. And what have you got, Ruth?
Well, I came hotfoot from the debate at Westminster Hall about Hammersmith Bridge. Sorry, this is a London topic. But as you all know, it's been shut for 7 years, and there are various people desperately trying to get it open again. We all say, those of us who walk and cycle, that it is open because it's very much in use by thousands and thousands of people daily. Um, Leo Murray, who people know from here, has managed to get a telegram put up somewhere, which is going to be showing exactly how many people are still using it. Sadly, this debate, being run by a couple of MPs, is saying that it has to go back to being open as normal, and that we do need buses on it because Putney has suffered from congestion ever since it shut. Well, I remember Putney in the 80s was always, always, always horribly congested. And as we know, you open something and it doesn't stop. But anyway, my reason for explaining about this is what is terribly sad is that there has been a suggestion of something called pods, which some of you may or may not know about, is a lightweight system of getting disabled people across that bridge, but it's kind of being dismissed out of hand. So in terms of active travel, which is why I'm mentioning it here, is it's very disappointing that we still think of same old, same old, same old, that only by having more roads, bigger roads, wider roads, etc., is the way to go forward. And it's actually quite upsetting to watch this kind of debate from people who've been given the statistics, which is that traffic on all bridges and pollution is down in the 7 years that it's been closed. So sorry, I just thought I'd bring that to you all. But I came to hear about school streets. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth, and very much agree with you on Hammersmith Bridge and Putney. I used to live in Wandsworth, the Putney side of Wandsworth in the 80s, so know just what you mean. Bob, oh, you're still muted.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just this a report on the meeting yesterday of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Cycling and Walking, which you should know about. And the topic yesterday was on autonomous vehicles, AVs. And my view has been, along with views of Christian Wolmar, whose book I praised when it first came out. So I may now be looking a bit silly because what he's been saying for the past 10 years is that AVs aren't going to be coming through. They're a solution in search of a problem, etc., etc. He's been talking about all the bad things, all the problems. It now does appear that a lot of schemes and places with AVs, principally AV taxis, are going to come in, and there is due to be a trial of robo taxis, AV taxis, whatever you want to call them, in London this year. Now, there are a lot of issues here for active travel people, basically about whether you can get knocked down by them, what is the legal position, what effect will it have on other traffic? It's a big subject. And I didn't quite get to understand what's going on myself yesterday, partly because of my internet connection going down, but also because there's a lot of stuff there. And it was one of these very rare APP meetings, which went on for about 2 hours, and there was a lot of stuff coming through. So it's just a kind of warning and watch out that there is stuff going on here, and we really have to be very vigilant about the legal controls on them in terms of safety, which I'm not at all satisfied with, plus the fact that it's still a kind of car solution being pushed. So watch this space, everybody. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Bob. Yeah, I found Hannah Fry's recent program on autonomous cars very interesting and a little bit frightening. Um, and yeah, a good way into the topic. But there's lots of stuff. I'm sure Christian, I haven't read Christian's book, but I bet it is a good one. H, what news have you got for us?
I was going to just catch up with some of the stuff. I just went offline there briefly. Um, the Albert Bridge, the next one up from Hammersmith job, now been reopened. But what's the condition of the deck? I haven't been had a chance to get down there, but looking at the condition of Hammersmith before it was done up, it was lumps of plywood pop riveted into the steel plate, which had holes in it. And so I'm very interested to know that, because there's also an instruction on the Albert was to break step, because it's a known problem with suspension bridges that they are very flexible. So if you set up a consistent vibration, which is what motor traffic does, as opposed to cycle traffic, you can actually set up some very harmful things. Thinking of Tacoma Narrows in particular, but
Oh
we won't
yes,
get
yeah, I remember
yeah.
seeing the video of that as part of my physics A level.
Yes, and the
Good.
other one I was going to check up on is I'm pushing the idea of total mobility. I've been driving an electric car for about past 6 years whenever I need one, and my motoring costs are under £100 a year total, compared to about the £5,000 a year it costs to keep a car on the road. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to get the initiative to get people to think, well, we don't need to own cars. It's 12 square meters of wasted space that's sitting still for 90% of the time. So how can we?
Yeah, one of the things in the integrated transport strategy, Better Connected, is that the government has committed to produce guidance on car clubs, and I think that is a good and positive thing, because it does allow people to have a car only when they need it. We use it actually. We used to have two cars. Now we've got one and use the car club when we need it, which actually turns out to be once or twice a year.
Well,
Which is a huge saving. It means it's like 50 quid a year instead of, as you say, probably 2,000, because we weren't using it much. But let us move on.
Yeah. Okay.
We will, thank you. And we will go to School Streets and Deborah in Manchester. Which
actually, Deborah's in
like
London at the moment. I live in London, but I work for Greater Manchester. I work for Salford Council at the moment.
You work for?
Salford City Council.
Okay, yeah.
Right, let me share my screen, and then you guys can let me know when it works. Hang on, there we go. How is that looking for you guys?
Yes. Just need to go to presenter mode.
Yep.
And that's there. All good.
Yeah. So hello, everybody. I'm going to talk today about my absolute bread and butter. I love talking about it because it's my very niche experience called School Streets. My name is Deborah Willemen. I'm a Flemish Belgian, and I am a principal transport planner and a School Streets lead, currently working at Salford City Council, but I am a contractor. So I have been all around the country, and I've looked at some of your faces, and you're all very familiar. So I've seen quite a few of you already. Now, hopefully this will work on Zoom as well, because I normally don't use Zoom. I use Teams. But I always talk about School Streets, and I feel that you can talk about School Streets until the cows come home, but if you show what School Streets can do, that's way more powerful. So I'm going to show you two little video clips. One from, and don't look at the timestamp here, one is from about 2016, 2017, the first one. And that's basically my school run. And the next one is about 6 to 7 years later, on the same junction. It's a little different vantage point, but it's the same junction. So it's before the School Street, and once the School Street has been bedded in for about 2 to 3 years. So enjoy that one first, and then we are going to talk a little bit more about what a School Street is. Yeah, you're okay. Go. Yeah, darling, go. They're the one that's bubbled. They were parked on the double yellow. They're the ones parked on the double yellow. It's their problem, not mine. I'm standing correctly. Start you. Learn how to drive, dude. If you hit me. This was taken on the 15th of November in 2023. This was 2 years that the School Street was open. You can see the double yellows there. That was the double yellows that I was standing on, arguing with drivers because they couldn't actually park where they should park. And this is early in the morning, right before the school opens. as you can see, the children and their parents, they are doing something what we would call critical mass. So they would be walking more on the streets, being relaxed and being safe. And anyone who wants to come into our school streets would be treated as an absolute guest of that school street if you are driving in a motorized vehicle. But look at the difference a couple of years makes. Actually, you can hear from my voice back in that first video that I used to be a campaigner. I campaigned for this particular school street in Haringey Council for 6.5 years. But now Haringey Council has got a whole program, and their school streets, they're going remarkably well. Now, what are school streets? School streets are an area where a school is located, which we open to walking and cycling. And I think this is really important to say. We're not closing any roads, but we're opening them so that you can safely walk and cycle everywhere in that area. And we do it during drop-off and pick-up time and in term time only. So not in the holidays. As you will see, there is critical mass of pedestrians. So we will make sure that motorized vehicles, which are allowed within that school street, become the guest in a very heavily pedestrianized area. Now, I want to talk to you guys about Greater Manchester, because there's always a lot of talk about school streets in London, because their programs are way more advanced than Greater Manchester. We know that Andy Burnham has pledged 100 school streets by, I think, 2028. And I've come into Greater Manchester as a contractor to help with that. And I was already helping with that before that pledge was made. So these 3 school streets, 3 pictures that you see here are the first 3 school streets that are opened in Oldham Council over the last couple of years. This one over here on the right, that was the first one, St. Anne's COV Primary School. And you can see this was a school street without a camera, but with an actual yellow barrier. We opened this school street because it didn't have any residents in the cul-de-sac. So that's what I always say to people. When you want to build a program of school streets, please absolutely start small and work your way up to bigger schemes. This was the smallest scheme that we could find. We just wanted to try it out to see what the appetite was and to see how the processes within the council would work, and to work from there. This school street is still going, and you can also see we did some complementary measures on the school street by doing some pavement build-outs. And they work actually really well. So by building the pavements a little bit out, people couldn't park on the pavements or next to the pavements because everything would be jam-packed. So this school street is still going on now. And then you see at the bottom here, school street. Again, a little bit of a step up. We did this school street with 2 planters by a company called Doing Our Bit. And these planters have a zip cord in between. And we did this with the cooperation of the school, because the school was very happy to do this via their caretaker. This school street only has about 4 or 5 houses, and talking to the residents there, they were also very happy to not have a camera and to do it that way. Now, I have to say, doing school streets with a barrier or a zip cord, so anything but a camera, is very labor intensive. It's very resource intensive and volunteer intensive. So you have to have the backing of the school to actually open and close these barriers, and the residents have to be happy with that. So these school streets were absolutely tiny. So the first one without residents, the second one was with a couple of residents. And then we go to the big school street, the one that basically spawned many more school streets with cameras across Greater Manchester. And that's the school street on Medlock Way. We opened that one on the 7th of September. I think it was 2024. And it took about 18 months of groundwork, basically, with the school to open this. Here you can see the camera standing, and then the two signs. So you can see school streets don't always look the exact same. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about Decameron 4 School Street today, because it's a very interesting first for Greater Manchester. Let me introduce the area. So here you can see the two schools, Haywood Zion Primary School and St. Edward's RC Primary School, two faith schools, which is really important to keep in mind for later. And then you have basically the roundabout here, and then you've got Medlock Way, which is a cul-de-sac. So this is one massive cul-de-sac with a lot of houses, one way in and out, with two schools that services 600 children. There's already 20-mile-an-hour road, and the main road, keep that one in mind, is Beckett Street. That's the main road next to the school. So this is the area that we're talking about. What does it look like in reality? So here you have the roundabout again. The school street starts here, and everything that's in teal is part of the school street. So we pointed the camera to go into the school street that way. We didn't put it here because we've got a pub here with a car park. So some parents would use that car park, and the pub was amenable to that. Not a problem at all. We discussed it with both schools, and the school streets timings, obviously for every school will be different, but for this scheme, it was 8:15 to 9:15 and 2:45 until 3:45. And I know Active Travel Cafe, you guys love your data. So that's why I pulled the data together of what I still had, because obviously I work in Salford City Council now, not Oldham Council. So pulled the data together that I had. We did some baseline data July 2024. So we opened in September, but the baseline data is in full summer, nice weather. And you could see that motorized traffic over 60% in the morning, pushing the 60% in the afternoon. And we were looking at, pushing 35% maybe in the morning, and then pushing 40% in the afternoon of active travel. So really a 60-40 divide, something that we are seeing in Oldham with our other schools. So it's every school that doesn't have a school street in Oldham is 60% motorized traffic and 40% walking and cycling. Then more data. This is the data from week 24. So February 2025, the school street has been bedding in slowly, and look at that difference. In the morning, we are pushing 60% of active travel, and equal in the PM, and the motorized traffic is getting a lot lower. But what is still the motorized traffic? Who is still, driving through our school street? So in March 25, they had 363 exemptions and permits.
Is. Well,
sorry?
Yeah, well, that's...
Sorry, is there a problem?
No, ignore it. Carry on.
All right, okay.
Somebody that should have muted that we will find and mute them.
All right, well...
Okay. So we had 363 exemptions and permits. 48...
Release it when you come back.
Can I continue?
That's Zoe
Yes.
is unmuted.
No worries.
Right.
So we have 48% of staff, 30% of residents. We had carers. So we talked about the scheme extensively with our ward councillors, and they were adamant because the residents of Medlock Way and surrounding streets that service the school street, basically, it's a very elderly population. And our councillors were adamant that those people who did have a carer, who's not necessarily a registered carer like a nurse or something, but like a family member, that they would actually get an exemption to the school street scheme. That was 12%. We had 7% of blue badges and 1.9%, so nearly 2% of child permits. Now, what are child permits? We have children with EHCPs who don't necessarily have a blue badge, but they might have special educational needs, autism, ADHD. Some children might present a flight risk. So in order to get these children in school and, and learning, some of those children will need a permit to be able to get to school. And we give the schools basically a letter. And those schools, they don't need to tell us, or these children parents, they don't need to tell us what the diagnosis is, but the school will give the letter to the family, and the family will upload it to our system. So GDPR wise, that's also very neat. We don't need to know what those children have. Now, something that is always a hot topic on school streets: are we going to displace the traffic, or are we going to disperse the traffic? Well, it depends on the school street. So remember that I talked about Beckett Street. That's the main road next to the cul-de-sac, the big cul-de-sac. We did the baseline data and we did the week 24 data with vivacity cameras. And it suggests that we did see an increase after week 24 of motorized vehicles of 20% in peak times. That was about 20 to 25 cars. So it wasn't like this whole big explosion of car use that we saw. We didn't see an overall increase in the rest of the day, but we also saw that there was so much more increase in active travel. So even though people were saying, "Oh, we're seeing so many more cars," that was because they actually got out of their own car and were walking, and their worldview outside the confines of their car was changing. So we saw an increase of walking and cycling of between 75 and 200%. So it was massive. We did also see an increase in park and stride, which was interesting. So if you see here on this little map, St. Edward's RC Primary School, so here's Medlock Way, there is this little stream and a little path that goes over the stream. And then if you look here on the bottom, we see Aldi. Now, some more people, they were actually using the Aldi car park as a park and stride. And the hands-up survey suggests that there was indeed an increase between 18 and 26%, depending on the day. And we didn't have any baseline data because we didn't think that we had to measure it over there. But what we saw is that more people, so 377 pedestrians on average in the morning peak and 406 pedestrians in the afternoon peak. Now, that seems like a lot, but imagine this. Aldi from there is half a mile. So that parent was walking half a mile back is 1 mile, come back half a mile. So the parents were doing 2 miles a day of walking, and the children were doing a mile a day of walking without actually realizing that they were helping their health and doing better and walking and, and being active. So we built in that little bit of activity in a day without them realizing it. Now, this is something that I'm very, very hot about. After week 24, we did a parent survey because the parents are always the ones that you need to convince the most. Your residents, they will always be happy with it, on the whole, happy with it, with the school street. But the parents, they have a lot of questions and they have a lot of reservations. And it takes a while for them to agree to it. So we do parent surveys a little bit later, after a couple of weeks, couple of months. And we ask, would you support the continuation of a school street? And look at the percentages. 65% agrees, 20% disagrees, and 15.5% no opinion. So I would say that's a really good support, basis of support. And then, would you encourage the trial of school street somewhere else, for other children? And 63% agrees, 18% disagrees, and 18% with no opinion. You will always have people who don't agree with the school street and who are, who do want to have a McDonald's drive-through. You will never have everyone on board. But if you can get a whole lot of people on board who were against it in the beginning, I think you have a success. Now, this is more for my colleagues in local authorities who are watching this, but for campaigners, I think this might also be quite interesting. So how do you set up a successful school street? And I always talk about the Holy Trinity. You need to have experienced officers. And I always say minimum a team of 3 people. Now, I'm currently working with a team of 2, so myself and my colleague. and it is really hard graft. So having that extra person on board is just so advisable. And then, of course, you need your other internal stakeholders. So every team where I come, the first thing I will do is I will set up a meeting, a weekly meeting with all the internal stakeholders that need to know. So that's highways, that's parking services, that is lighting columns. So all these people that need to know, they will get invited. And mostly I will tell them, look, this is what's in the diary. Don't need you today, but I will need you next week to come in and make sure that, you know what's going on. Next on the Holy Trinity is your school's senior leadership team and your board of governors. Now, if you talk to a school and only your, let's say, business manager is on board, but he or she doesn't talk to the head teacher, or the senior leadership team doesn't talk to your board of governors, you have to have all these noses pointed into the right direction, the same direction, make sure that they're all on board. And you make sure that they sign a memorandum of understanding before you actually agree to proceed. Memorandum of understanding is basically a document that we use where it states what the schools need to do and what the council needs to do. Now, the schools need to work on behavior change, just the same as your lunchbox analogy. You're going to bang on about healthy eating every single day of the week. Why are you not banging on about healthy traveling every day of the week? If you're only going to do one bikeability session a year and one walk to school week a year, you're not going to change behavior. So we're really hot on that. We want our schools to do these things. And then next one up the Holy Trinity is obviously political support. The school street in Oldham, we could not have pulled off if our ward members weren't on board. They even went door knocking to make sure that every single person signed up to have a permit, and those were all elderly people, not always having the Wi-Fi or the internet or a laptop to do so. And these ward councillors went knocking on every door to make sure that the permits were granted and done. Obviously, you also need your lead member on board, because if they're not on board, but this is the Holy Trinity: experienced officers, the school and the board of governors on board, and your political support. If they all want the same thing, aka making children safe on the school run, then you can go and sell your scheme to your residents and to your public. Another notch on how to set up a successful school street is engagement. I keep saying this. You need to talk to people continuously. This is the crux of your work. This is your bread and butter. You talk to highways, you talk to parking services, lighting, health and education, also very important. And then, of course, legal, procurement, finance. When you're doing your budgeting, you're doing your funding bits, etc. And then what's equally important is your external engagement. You need to talk to your schools continuously. You need to be their agony aunt. A school street that is in the running, let's say April next year, you're already talking to them now. You're making sure that they're doing their hands up survey, that they're collecting their postcode data, all that stuff. And then you keep talking to them once a month at least, to make sure that they know that you're working towards the opening of that school street, and that they know they have to work on the behavior change. Then obviously you're going to start talking to your residents when you're ready, other various stakeholders like nurseries, businesses. And then you make sure that your web page is up to scratch, up to date with all the things that you're doing, with a good freedom of information, with a frequently asked questions, all that stuff. Make sure that that's watertight. It's very important that every time you keep moving with a scheme, that you also put that on the web page, that's all up to date. Now, two things that I think are really important with setting up a successful program, not just a trial, but an entire program, and that's marketing and education. As I said, my first school street in Oldham was a tiny scheme in a cul-de-sac with no residents. That wasn't a school street to push behavior change. That was never going to happen. That scheme was too small. But We did that as a communication tool. It should be viewed less as an active travel intervention and more as a communication tool. We want people to start talking about these things on Facebook, on social media, on those kind of things. We even had Dame Sarah Story come to our first school street, even though it was tiny, to make sure that she put it in the limelight and said, hey, look, Oldham is doing this. People should not be driving to school. What about, start talking about it. And then education is really important. So when I come into a team, education will be 90% of my role in the first 3 months. So how do you open a school street? Why do you do complementary measures? This is how cameras work, for example. And then I get a lot of comments saying, oh, but where are parents going to park? Well, they're going to park at home. But driving this message through takes 3 to 6 months, even until our internal stakeholders will understand. And then you have to do the same thing with your external stakeholders. I have talked to so many head teachers who think that we're going to come and save the day, and that we are going to invent a McDonald's drive-through style school where parents can come into the playground and pick up their children by car. So we need to educate them that their parents are the problem. The school community, as a pillar of their community, is part of the problem. As such, they will also be part of the solution. So once they understand that, they can start working as a community to make sure that all the children can be safer. But I am absolutely your resident agony aunt. Be prepared for repeated messaging, ongoing explanations. You're continuously talking and saying the same things. Timeline. So your timeline, this is more for offices as well. There's a difference between experimental and permanent schemes. So we always start with an experimental order, let it run for 18 months, and then make it permanent if the scheme is successful. So always try it out first. Sell it that way as well, so you can tweak it, and then people understand, oh, if it doesn't work, we can still pull it. Understand permanent schemes also need additional statutory and government processes. So when you do an engagement levels, even with an experimental traffic order, you have to redo them for your permanent scheme. Stagger your scheme delivery by year 2 to manage capacity and learning. So what I always say is open a few experimentals, and then by year 2, you're opening experimentals again, but then you have to go back to your year 1 scheme. So stagger them all the time. So open one experimental scheme and then make one permanent. Open one experimental, make one permanent. And then try and avoid launching a new scheme, especially when you're a tiny team with 1 or 2 people. So avoid launching a new scheme while consulting on another to allow sufficient breathing space, because otherwise your mental health is going to be shot. The consultation, the groundwork of these schemes is always the biggest. Opening it, putting the lining and signing in, and making sure that your camera is switched on. That's the easy part. The biggest part is your engagement, your consultation, your talking to make sure that everyone knows what's coming up. Now, the last slide that I have for you, ANPR pitfalls, because there are some. Always make sure that you allow for time. So I've seen in Oldham and in other places that it can take up to 8 weeks from buying your camera to delivery of the camera. It depends also on the company, but 8 weeks gives you breathing space. And give yourself 4 weeks from putting that camera on its column to go live, because you do have a lot of compliance. You do need to make sure that, when it's switched on, that it actually grabs your number plates. Have a think about lighting columns. So always talk to your lighting column team, because in some local authorities they're in-house, some local authorities they're third party. If they're, for example, E.ON third party, you will have a problem because they don't want anything mounted on their lighting columns. And old columns, they always need replacing. That will cost you additionally. So a camera is £22,000 on average, and a lighting column is £2,000. So you're looking at quite an additional amount of money. that you need to spend. DVLA and CADO agreement, this is again for people who work in parking services. Make sure that the DVLA knows that you've got moving traffic offences powers, and that you're going to ask for keepers details, because we did this in Salford last year, and then we switched our first camera on, and then once of a sudden we weren't getting any keepers details from the DVLA. Sorry, that's my dog. It looked like the DVLA didn't actually manage our request. Compliance rates. Even when people come through your camera, your compliance rate is about 50% payments. So think about that as well. And then when your residents are talking about money-making schemes, your cameras, like I said, cost £22,000. But maintaining them from year 2 will cost £7,000 per camera. So the more cameras you set up, you're going to have maintenance costs, for the back office that cost £7,000. You need to calculate that within your budgets. And we don't necessarily get that kind of money. Now, for example, a TFGM would say, oh, but that comes from the maintenance pot that you guys have in-house. We are not going to fund that. But schemes like these are not made to make money. They are made to make sure that children are safe. So from the moment that these warning notices go in, not everyone will keep going through these schemes and paying. And even though if they pay, the compliance rate is only 50%. So you will never make the money back. Sometimes you will break even, but it's very, very rare. So yes, any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Deborah. That was a really great presentation. Thank
I really went
that
through
off
it.
share.
Hang on, I really went through it quite fast. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Well, it was very comprehensive. Just one check on first. When you say compliance rate about 50%, what do you measure
Payment
the compliance?
Paying.
Okay, yeah. Of 100 vehicles clocked by the cameras passing through,
50 will be paid. 50
50%
fines will be paid. Yeah.
And the rest will be, you don't register the number plate, or you register it, but you send out the bill and nobody pays it.
Yeah, and then if you have to go after that payment, obviously that will cost money internally as well. So you do have to calculate that. Yes.
Okay. Well, we've got a good set of questions for you, as we hope. This always happens here. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions about engagement. So that's an early stage in the process, and you talked about engaging officers, schools, and the politicians. To what extent were you also engaging parents and pupils?
We do that as last, really. The process that we do first is we talk to the schools to see if they're agreeable, because if you don't have the schools on board, it won't work. If the SLT is agreeable and their staff are agreeable, we go to the Board of Governors, because they need to be agreeable as well. If there's one person who goes, oof, this doesn't work, we don't want this, your whole scheme can go wrong. And I've had people like this where we were talking to the business manager, and there was one person, there was a head teacher who couldn't really care, and she was like, yeah, we'll do it. And then right the day before the consultation event, she pulled out. So really make sure that all these people are on board, first of all. When they are on board and they're happy with the plans that we are proposing, you go to your ward councillors, because they will bear the brunt of residents and parents fighting back. So if they're on board and they're happy, so you have to educate them and show them, look, this absolutely does work. Just give it a try. Let's try it out.
So this is a council-led scheme. This is not a parent pull.
Yes, it's a council-led scheme, but it's with community support.
yes, but you build the support. So it's interesting.
And then we go to the parents. The parents are the last. Yeah. The residents on the whole, they will always like it, because they're the ones complaining.
Yes, of course, because they don't see the benefits, but they face some of the problems. And do you notice any? You talked about. You talked about the faith schools, and I can't
Yes,
remember if
I
you
wanted to come
mentioned
back
any
to that.
fee-paying schools.
Yeah,
Do you
so
notice any difference between conventional state schools, faith schools, and fee-paying schools? For instance, people in the chat have mentioned, or the Q&A have mentioned, there may be longer, wider catchment areas, so more people driving. People may be wealthier, and so more inclined just to pay the fine. It's only 35 quid a day after all. Hey, I'm not that rich. Anyway, comments.
So there is a difference, but for these schools, we thought the catchment area was going to be a lot bigger. It was not. So the catchment area was literally 2 miles as well for both schools. Now, those schools, the reason they were on the fence in the beginning was the fact that they thought that they would lose pupils. And actually, the opposite happened. They gained
Ah,
pupils. And especially in this day and age where we have less children being born and less children going to primary schools, to the point that they're closing schools now. For example, in Hackney, schools are closing, so school streets are vanishing. So that was actually really pleasant to see. So we saw an uptick in pupils going to those schools, so that was good. Now I have worked with private schools before as well, and obviously, like an academy, they work very much like a business. I would put fee-paying schools and academies in the same context, but then I put my campaigner hat on and go, you don't want your children to be safe. And then they go, no, we haven't said that at all. So, and that's then a really good angle of, okay, so why don't we have a chat then about and trash it out how you see this working? And even with a school street, you can still have a park and stride like we showed. You know, we can still look at these things, but people can drive and park away for a 10-minute walk and walk in. That should never be a problem. You should not be able to actually drive with the front of your car into the school gate. It's not necessary.
I suddenly feel compelled to ask my local authority how many of its schools have car crash on their risk registers. But
Good
yeah.
question. Yeah.
The okay, that's really interesting. Also commercially, if with my business hat on, the fact that you can gain pupils by making them safer, and I
And
mean that's
offset. So I always sell offset as well. So a school who doesn't have a very good offset rating, and
yeah.
where it's about health and safety and safeguarding and all that stuff, I say to them, look, offset is going to look at you very favorably if you work with me on safeguarding, because safeguarding is also a thing when it comes to traveling to school. We need to keep our children safe, and that is a big hook that I use as well.
That's super. That's super interesting. If you can capture somewhere the extra pupils and all those benefits, very interesting. Right. The much more specific question about signage from Cameron. The This is not the ANPR cameras, but he was questioning the zip code barrier as is this
Yeah.
compliant? That I mean, it doesn't appear in the TRS GD.
No. No, you could use bollards as well. I mean, we've used coffin bollards, for example. This was the how can I say, this was the solution that the residents in the school wanted. And obviously, when we make these things permanent, but also we have to do a ModGov report. And in that ModGov report, that solution goes to the emergency services. If the emergency services would pipe up and say, we don't think this is actually safe and we can't actually get in, then we would not use that solution. But that solution worked for everybody, and we are obliged to actually pass it by police and ambulance services and all those things, and they were happy for us to proceed.
Okay. Yes. And just for extra piece of data, we've had 2 waves of school streets in Oxfordshire, 4 and then 5, and then the third wave have been approved. The 9 that have been started off with essentially fold out barriers of various types.
I know, I helped in Oxford.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah.
And then when they were approved, they were converted to ANPR. The third set of an additional 4 schools it was just decided they were all so successful, and they were getting approval ratings of 80 to 90%.
Well, there you go.
They were it was agreed that they would all go straight to ANPR on the assumption that they would
Yeah. Now, I have to say,
go-
though, we're
go
talking about the
forwards.
north-south divide. Working in the north
Mm,
of the country is very much as working in the Wild West when it comes to traffic and to not driving.
that's
So I have been banging my head with my teams, and they know this, bless them, about control parking zones as a complementary measure around school streets for 3 years now, and I'm not anywhere still. So yeah, you cannot compare Oxford or London or the south of the country with the north of the country. There is the mentality is a lot different.
I think you could compare bits of Oxford. So we've had different experiences, and apologies for, but I think this is a useful part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So East Oxford, much much more mixed, much more deprived, frankly, and another phenomenon we have there is one of the groups that are permitted to go through the barriers are taxis, but only when they're. So we have this issue of we believe that taxi drivers take their kids to school. They're allowed to take other people's children to schools as taxi drivers, but they're not meant to take their own children to school. But there is
How do you police that?
circumstantial evidence, I should say.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Another do you have an issue talking about people it affects most? Trip chainers, delivery drivers. Yeah, let's go with those two groups first.
So trip chainers, so it's basically, but I'm going to work and I need to drop my kid off.
Exactly.
So we deal with that. So, they talk to me, and I'm a single parent of 2 children. Now, my children are bigger and they're doing their own thing. But I am very much known as a cargo bike mom here in London. So I used to use my cargo bike, and we cycle to school all the time. So they come to me, and I've always held down a full-time job as well. So they come to me with, but I need to get to school. Yeah, well, I need to get to, I had to get to work as well. Not a problem. There are parents out there, and sometimes you have to become a little bit harder. There are parents out there who think that we as transport planners need to become their personal travel planners. So we give people more than enough time, at least 2-3 months to get their head around how are we going to do this. If there is like a flood on the road, or emergency works, they won't be able to get through that streets either, right? So they they'll be late, something will happen, they will need to adjust. We're just asking them to adjust, and we give them 8 to 12 weeks. Then they will have to park away and walk in. Now, we do speak with the schools, and it's really good that we're seeing this rollout now of free breakfast clubs, because a lot more schools are doing before school care and breakfast clubs. So people who do need to be somewhere for work, and they can't actually bring their children to school, walking wise, they can come to breakfast club. So that's one of the first things I always ask the school that we work with, or the schools that we work with: do you provide a breakfast club? Are you open at 8, for example? So that's before the school street. And most schools nowadays, they do provide a breakfast club. And then delivery drivers, like we see in London, delivery drivers like Amazon, every, DPD, they all learn not to drive through the school street, because they'll have to start paying the fines, and they don't come in school streets times. And if they do, they have their little trolley with them. That's something that in Greater Manchester they're still learning to do. That it's not completely bedded in yet. We do have residents who then go, but my window cleaner is coming at 8:45. Well, your window cleaner can come 15 minutes later, or actually can park away and walk in. That's also fine. We do get also, so residents do want to have their cake and eat it, but at some point we then have to say no, that's not possible.
Okay, I'm going to do one that 3 people have asked, so and then we'll go to the live hands. There's a couple of live hands. Through roads, or more major roads. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it to that. School streets
Yeah, so in Oldham, I was actually, before I left there, I was working on a scheme that basically had a bus route. They've canned the scheme now because it was a big scheme, and but we did do the data, and the data would suggest that actually the bus would go faster, which was a through road as well. But if you as a local authority, you're just starting up, like I said, don't run before you can walk. Start small with your cul-de-sacs, preferably without residents, and then work yourself up. I don't know a lot of local authorities who are doing massive schemes like bus routes, etc. An A or a B road, closing that off for motorized traffic at drop-off and pickup time, that's never going to work, unfortunately.
We're the same way. Okay, let's go to Carla. In somewhere beginning with W. Is it Wandsworth or is it somewhere else?
No, it's Westminster City Council. Sorry, my
Westminster.
There
okay.
we go. We're delayed.
Hi, Carla.
Was delayed. Hiya. So I'm effectively your counterpart down in the south. So yeah, I lead on School Streets, or the program for Westminster. We're a bit more advanced where you are.
You are absolutely. Yeah. Like I say, I'm in the Wild West.
No, I think you've done a brilliant start, and I'd love to duplicate you and have you down in Westminster. To be fair.
Just to let you know, I am a gun for hire. I am a contractor, and my contract is running out very shortly. So for any local authority hiring officer who's here at the moment, I am very happy to come and help.
Good to know. But I will catch up with you separately just on a couple of questions.
Sure.
My main couple of points, but really quickly. Pupils, or I've included pupil voice at the beginning and throughout, in terms of engagement, just because we always forget about it, that it's named School Streets. They should be part of that engagement, along with your politicians, your residents, and everyone else.
We just don't have the time, Carla. We need to. We are.
No, I'm only me. No, I'm only me. I do exactly all what you listed is just me leading on it and doing it. So it's totally possible. I'm going to really push hard on that one. Don't get me wrong. I have contractors that help me, but it's all me leading it. And the schools, like you say, are key. But my main question for you is, I've got a robust now monitoring program and evaluation, and I'm actually looking at evaluating all of the school streets as to how it's basically, hopefully, reducing any casualties, it's improved air quality, or how much by, and increased active travel potentially for the school and the wider community as well. What's your plan, or have you got anything in place for monitoring your current two school streets?
Yes, yeah. So we fall under Transport for Greater Manchester, and so the Oldham one, that was the first ANPR enforced school street in Greater Manchester. So that one was really, it was the case study for opening all the others. So the monitoring and evaluation, we got cameras from Vivacity, and we did all that stuff. And Andy Burnham basically made his pledge on that school street. TFGM at the moment is asking us for monitoring and evaluation as well. So we're doing that with hands up surveys. We're doing that with postcode data. We're not doing that with Vivacity cameras because we just don't have the money. We're already scraping behind the couch to get a program rolling. But what TFGM has done, they've got ACOM involved at the moment. So they are going into the school. We're having a meeting actually tomorrow in Salford City Council, a meeting with ACOM because we want to make sure that they ask the right questions and they gather the right data. So ACOM is doing that for us to really make that robust case for more school streets as well. But we're lucky we have TFGM. I don't know if Transport for London is helping you guys with that, but really they should be kicked into.
I haven't brought up. They do, and it varies, and it depends on the member of staff, shall I say. There is a Pan London working group, so I started that up from the very first one with Road Safety GB, and then it got subsumed by Sustrans.
I'm going to stop you there.
I will stop. Thank you.
But that is a brilliant connection made. Shows the value of the Active Travel Cafe and Employment Exchange. Mark, you've got your hand up there. I know you've got a question in the chat. You might want to ask that one or a different one.
Moving traffic offences since the end of last year, so I'm really, really interested in that.
Yeah, thanks. So I've just put it in the chat. My son's school, which I wrote the travel plan for, started off with an experimental order and permanent bollards, turning it into a cul-de-sac all the time. The experimental order didn't succeed because people who lived on it complained about being closed all the time. So it was replaced with a parent stacked. We put in bollards at one end and operated a gate at the other end.
Okay.
Which is great, but too much effort for the parents who ran it. It was a parent-run one.
Yeah.
And Sustrand helped out, but they couldn't keep going. And it's now being replaced with ANPR. So local people are saying this is a really backward step because you could just drive through it. Yes, you'll get fined, but it's less safe than having a permanent bollard. Our local candidate, who was the MP for the area until 24, is really opposed to it because he said all that fines do, don't necessarily agree with him, but his position is all that fines do is they give a carte blanche to rich parents to ignore it, and poorer parents, including the ones who drive, can't do it. So it's just it's a regressive tax, and it doesn't work. Now, what I'm interested in is finding some data about the effectiveness of cameras as opposed to the effectiveness of bollards, which obviously is 100% effective. But is it 90% or is it 50? I think you said 50%. So
your compliance rate
like
of paying, is but don't forget, Mark, as well, when you go after these fines as a local authority, it costs a lot of money with bailiffs, with all that stuff. You're trying to impound cars and stuff like that. I live in Haringey, and there are still one or two parents who keep coming into our school street, who keep going to court, who keep get their because in the end, it's not about paying the fines. These things can go to court in the end, and their car will get impounded, and then they just buy a new car.
Yeah,
it's very, very really rare. I haven't seen that anywhere else, to be fair.
But what I wanted to ask you is, in my frequent trips to Brussels, they have raising bollards operated school streets.
Do you know the maintenance cost if a car is driven into a bollard like that? We don't.
Let's have a study tour, but they must have the same issue. So it'd be interesting to find out from schools in Flanders, or from local authorities in Flanders, how much it costs. So there's a job for you. I'm sure you can manage that.
Now, I have actually, we have been looking at those bollards, right? But every time that bollard comes up and a car is actually coming over, the maintenance. This is a local authority thing. How are we going to maintain our infrastructure? Even with our cameras, that is a massive headache. You can put something in, but maintaining it, because there's just no money. We are putting in school streets literally with scraping the back of our couches. Yeah. So these kind of things, I would already say, no, if you can't maintain it, if something, we had our first school street in Oldham, we had a coffin bollard, and a member of staff actually drove over it. And then her husband got annoyed at us, at our team, and did a freedom of information request to get everything about the school street.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to
move on. I'm going to go.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Bob.
Hi, Deborah. So nice to see Deborah.
Hello, darling. How are you?
Okay, Deborah was a good cycle training instructor down in London some time ago. Nice to see you again. Apart from the upturned flower pot over your head, which I don't quite understand. What's the proportion? How many schools have got out of what proportion? Because I know in London it's about 100 schools per borough. So what proportion in the area you're working in? I can't quite work out whether it's Greater Manchester or just
it's Salford City Council at the moment. Per district, I think there's about 100 to 120 schools. I'm writing a business case at the moment so we can do 5 school streets per year. That's right. Kind of our aim. Yeah.
It still takes a good 10 years before half of them are done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Deborah.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Brendan.
Yes. Am I coming through?
Yes.
You are.
2 things, one technical and one a bit more theoretical. The technical one, ANPR need not cost anything like what you're talking about. I know there are technicalities to it, but you can repurpose a smartphone, and there's ANPR apps. And there's also a citizen science project called TELRAM, TELRAAM, which is a few £100. I don't think that does ANPR, but at least it can monitor volumes of traffic and so on. So you can do that much more cheaply and use social shaming of people rather than fines, I guess, if you put it about who is repeatedly offending. The other one is a piece of research. Some of you may be aware there's a woman called Emma Ranhoff from Roskilde University, who's been publishing stuff about how cycling infrastructure grew and how the habit of cycling grew in Holland, which she says is not what the Dutch have said they've done, but what they've actually done, which is starting with school streets and school transport. And that sets a habit effectively for life, and it grows up then with the parents and the children through life. So the networks then automatically spread out with the changed people rather than having to fight for more and more infrastructure investment. So I'll put the link to her work in the chat.
I completely agree with it. With the first point, I don't agree, because we do have GDPR and those policies, and our moving traffic offences. The DVLA and the Department for Transport is really hot on those kind of things. So that's just not going to happen. But the second thing, I am always really, really keen, and it's hard because it's again talking to a business. But I'm always keen to open a school street where there's a nursery and a school. And do both at the same time. Like you say, start them small and start them young, and you will set them up for life, definitely. And then when you have so we're not there in Greater Manchester yet, but what we tend to do is you make a school street, and you make a school street, and you make a school street. Oh, we've got 3 school streets in one area. Why don't we make a low traffic neighborhood?
Yeah, I think there's a poll we should do on a future Active Travel Cafe about when we all started cycling. I'm assuming that we most of us cycle here, although there's more to active travel than that. But okay, well, you were from Flanders. I mean, I was 6.
I was born with a bike on my back.
Let's not do that now. Right, we are very close to end of time. Let's have H. You've got 20 seconds to make a question.
My God, I was going to comment to Deborah that I'm also a prostitute. I'm looking for work, if there is any.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on then.
Well, I've just posted something in the chat about the health and safety policy, duty of care. And from 1984, with Lothian region, every school had rules about where vehicles could come in, and any delivery vehicles coming on site had to be managed by an attendant on foot, and no children, and they only had to come in when there were no children on the school grounds.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore.
I mean, that's Also, a lot is outside the school, but I take your point. That health and safety bit is lost. Ruth.
Hi, Debbie. Lovely to see you. Last time I saw you was campaigning Stop King Cyclists. Very quickly, so my partner lives in Holland. Sorry, Robin. All the streets are one-way, bi-directional for cycling, and there's no ANPR, and people cope, and carers cope, and still school children and chain tripping. Why can we not simply do this here by, instead of fussing about with planters that get moved out the way and cameras, etc., etc.?
What's that degeneration?
That may be a topic for another day.
I would be out of a job if everybody would do what they're supposed to do. So
brilliant. That's a brilliant question to reach the end. But I think it goes a little beyond school streets, Ruth. I mean, that is absolutely, totally agree with you, and very much the point of the Active Travel Cafe. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Deborah. That was a really in-depth and inspirational session. And I've popped the link. I mean, there's not as much detail, but I've popped the link to Oxfordshire's stuff in the chat, and I'm sure Mark Gregory, who runs that team, will be interested to swap notes about how you measure these things with you and Carla in Westminster. Thank you all for coming on a Tuesday evening to hear about active travel again. Next week, we have our very own Steve Connor talking about something interesting happening in Manchester, would you believe? He is talking about the Cyan Lines project, which is a network of walking routes within the centre of Manchester City, and blue and green trails. That's where they got the cyan from. Very interesting project. I know I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm really keen to learn a bit more about this. Great thing for any city to be doing is encouraging walking within the city, and look forward to seeing many of you there. Have a great week, walking, wheeling, cycling in between.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.